You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? Whether you're planting fruit trees, adding privacy, brightening things up with flowers, or bringing in houseplants, Fast Growing Trees has it all. Even better, they can help you find options that are right for your climate, your space, and lifestyle. Click Order Grow. Every plant arrives healthy with the Alive and Thrive guarantee straight to your door. So if you're ready to get planting, this is the moment. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code WWO at checkout. That's an additional 20% off. Better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WWO at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WWO. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WWO to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Go to growingfasttrees.com for details.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. So I'd like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. I want to speak with you this morning about the Pope and the President. And maybe it's worth remembering the history of our relationship with Catholics in America and beyond. So let's talk about it. We know that the first Catholic to be nominated for President of the United States was Alfred E. Smith, four-time governor of New York. He was the nominee in 1928. I have a shelf in my library of anti-Catholic materials. Oh, yes, remember the subways were being dug in New York during those days? And indeed, the speculation came about that, in fact, the subway was going to create a secret tunnel all the way to the Vatican. And who would run the nation? The Pope. That's right. Indeed, Al Smith gave a very courageous speech in Oklahoma City in which he explained that he was a loyal American, that Catholics should not be challenged over who they are or what they believe. And Al Smith waged a valiant campaign. But the anti-Catholic prejudice was real, and believe it or not, in my library I have a ton of material that was issued in 1928 against Al Smith, including his brilliant statement, which was published in the Atlantic Monthly, describing why, as a Catholic, this kind of prejudice was absolutely outrageous. And then there was John F. Kennedy, who was nominated in 1960 by the Democratic Party to be their nominee for president, and who was a Roman Catholic, a practicing Roman Catholic. And yes, there was anti-Catholic prejudice, even as renowned a clergyman as Norman Vincent Peale was prepared to sign a declaration about whether or not a Catholic was fit to be president. And indeed, Billy Graham had to participate in these vigorous discussions about theology. Now, the interesting thing is, Kennedy won the election, and the issue of a Catholic being in the White House sort of vanished. Indeed, when William Edward Miller was nominated for vice president by the Republicans in 1964, Miller, a Roman Catholic, on the ticket with Barry Goldwater, there was not a blip on the screen. No anti-Catholic prejudice emerged against Bill Miller. And then, of course, there was Sargent Shriver, who ran for president, was a traditional Catholic. He was the last pro-life Democrat to run for president of the United States, and the last pro-life Democrat to be on a national ticket. Remember, he was George McGovern's running mate after Eagleton's resignation in 1972. The fact that a person is a Catholic or a Protestant or even a Jew seems not to matter anymore. Joe Lieberman, a traditional Jew, was nominated for vice president of the United States with Al Gore in 2000. And of course, you remember that the question of his being a Jew made hardly a blip on the screen. But now we have a president of the United States who has focused on religion and has challenged Pope Leo and has said Pope Leo is pro-crime, that he doesn't care whether Iran has a nuclear weapon. The President of the United States has decided to have a battle with the Supreme Pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. It makes no sense. And indeed, did you see the posting of Donald Trump depicted in Jesus-like garb, laying hands on someone in order to cure them? Of course, there was such outrage that Trump took that post down, but he doesn't apologize. No, following the dictate of Roy Cohn, he never apologizes for anything. Well, the simple truth is that the arrogance of power is revealed in Donald Trump. And the question becomes, who do you trust, the President of the United States or the Pope? And I will tell you overwhelmingly, I believe most people are inclined to trust the Pope. Granted, he is American-born, and of course, Donald Trump had to suggest that the only reason an American became Pope was because Donald Trump was President of the United States. It is the arrogance of Donald Trump and the unwillingness to apologize for what is clearly an egregious error. Now, what does it mean when you antagonize the Roman Catholic community? Do you pay a penalty? And it's a good question. The polls now all indicate that Roman Catholics are very disenchanted with Donald Trump, that his depicting himself as almost Christ-like is not acceptable to most Catholics. And I would suggest not acceptable to most Americans. There is something seriously wrong when a country cannot admit that it made a mistake, or when a president can't admit he made a mistake. The lessons of Al Smith and John F. Kennedy, and yes, William E. Miller and Sargent Shriver, and others, Roman Catholics, nominated for President of the United States at a time when we are willing to concede that prejudice is wrong. So when you have a confrontation between the Pope and the President, and you know that the Pope is a thoroughly honest man, and he is, and he's a man with a great reputation in terms of his stance in the world, a man who is dedicated, as he puts it, to fulfilling the gospel, spreading the message of peace, condemning war. And when the President of the United States accuses the Pope of being soft on crime, I really had to pause and think, what in the world is he talking about? There is a serious question that is being raised by many about the fitness of Donald Trump to be President of the United States. And I believe it is a legitimate concern. It doesn't mean that Donald Trump will be impeached. It doesn't mean that he would be convicted by the Senate. It doesn't even mean that the 25th Amendment might be invoked. That's Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. But what it means is that all of us should question the stability of the President of the United States. Remember, just a few weeks ago, he was talking about obliterating, destroying Iranian civilization. That the idea of bombing them back to the Stone Ages, something that no president had ever suggested about anyone, well, that should raise a lot of concerns. Do the American people have to choose between the president and the Pope? No, of course not. The Pope will never be on the ballot in the United States. But the fact is that millions of Catholics in this country are rightly, deeply offended by what Donald Trump has said, his challenge to the Pope, his refusal to apologize, his posting of a picture of himself in a Christ-like stance. These kinds of things should be disturbing to all of us. But it's not just that. It's the cumulative effect of Donald Trump's constant barrage of things that are outrageous, egregious, unacceptable. I wanted to open this morning by suggesting to you that the president's stability, his mental health, should be in question. Now, I remember vividly in 1964 when Ralph Ginzburg published a magazine called Fact Magazine. And the conclusion of this magazine, I still have a mint condition copy of that edition, is that more than 1,000 psychiatrists in the United States considered Barry Goldwater to be unfit to be president of the United States. Ginzburg sued, went to the Supreme Court, and actually won a financial settlement against Ginzburg for that accusation. And one of the things we learned is that making a psychiatric evaluation from a distance, well, it doesn't work. You have to have one-on-one time with someone. You have to really understand who they are and what they represent. And Goldwater was certainly psychologically fit to be president. It was an outrageous claim by Ginzburg in Fact Magazine. But with Donald Trump, there is a whole other genre of speculation. After all, we have now watched him carefully for more than a decade. We have had a chance to see him in a variety of situations. And clearly, at least in my mind, there is something wrong, something terribly wrong. And remember that when a president can threaten to wipe out a civilization, even though it may just be a rhetorical flourish, the simple fact is that the President of the United States, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the man who controls the nuclear codes, has the ability to do just that. I have a simple question. If Donald Trump had made statements like these, cumulatively, when he was a candidate for president, my question is, do you think he would have won? And the answer is no. The American people would have said, no, this is unacceptable. So here's the question. I hear Democrats saying that his conduct is unacceptable, that his rhetoric is inflammatory and wrong. But where are the Republicans? Evidently, quietly, in the cloakrooms in Washington, the Republicans are saying they are uneasy as well. What do you do when you have a large number of people looking at the President of the United States, both domestically and in terms of foreign observers, who believe that the president is unbalanced? That's right, unbalanced. What kind of judgment do you make? Now, I was fascinated by J.D. Vance, who brushed off the president's equation of himself with Christ as the president simply making a joke. And why people couldn't understand that, J.D. Vance wanted to know. Well, the answer is because the president doesn't call it a joke. The president's supporters don't call it a joke. J.D. Vance is the vice president of the United States. He is a heartbeat away from the presidency. Now, we could spend a considerable amount of time talking about what happens when vice presidents disagree with presidents. Doesn't happen very often. At least in public, it doesn't happen very often. John Nance Garner, who was Franklin Roosevelt's vice president, disagreed with him on the court packing case, and essentially walked away when Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the Supreme Court. We saw Dan Quayle dissent vigorously over the question of pursuing the elimination of the Zionism is Racism resolution. It was Dan Quayle who really pushed the administration of George H.W. Bush to accomplish that astounding feat. It is difficult for a vice president. Hubert Humphrey learned the lesson when he criticized the war in Vietnam privately in the White House and was frozen out by Lyndon Johnson for almost the entire time he was vice president. I am conscious of the fact that a vice president has to be respectful of a president. But that doesn't mean that a vice president sloughs off statements like those made by Donald Trump. They are not a joke. Let's be clear. Pope Leo has been clear, precise, and fair. Donald Trump, well, his rhetoric, his postings, just nuts. And that should cause all of us to be concerned not only about the future of Donald Trump, but the future of the American presidency itself. Donald Trump should be ashamed of himself, and we would have far more respect for him, even if we disagree with his policies, if he would admit error. But again this morning, Donald Trump said, "I will make no apologies. I'm right. Pope Leo is wrong." Mr. President, history will judge, and I believe that you will be judged harshly. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links to the show notes to connect with me on social media. Friday will soon be here, and your questions on this matter will be welcome. Indeed, I'm interested in your observations. Please remember to share the episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which, of course, is our goal. The show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on advertising support. This will help us to create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman, and that, frankly, warms the cockles of my heart. I want to say a big thank you to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. Gogo, thank you as always. And to all of you, I'll be back here tomorrow on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Who knows where we'll be then? I can't wait to find out. See you tomorrow.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.